Hello, everybody. This is Aubrielle with not just the cosmos, but the conscientious cosmos, where we talk about all things astrology and energetics. And I think I finally found a really good audio solution. So, cheers to that. We're not going to do the AirPods anymore because that just does not work. And it sounds very weird. But that's okay because I'm still going to keep the previous videos that I did. Let's move on. I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are in the world right now, and leaning into that high vibrational energy, growth mindset, God consciousness type stuff, because everything will go as you think it will, and it will go as you let it. So yes, in this video I'm going to be talking about the elements in astrology, the 4 elements, key elements in Western astrology. Hellenistic astrology specifically will be the lens that I'm talking about this from. And as a more broad spectrum understanding, I think we're aware of the 4 elements: air, earth, fire, and water. So that is I think that's the basis for a lot of everything in astrology. Honestly, it always comes back to the elemental things. I know that there's other things like that, especially because, and I'll talk about it here, there are going to be aspects of astrology that bounce off of that understanding of elemental factors. So I guess we'll just go right into it with the starting off with fire. And fire is this, like, from an energetic lens, it's the energy of creation and transformation. You're able to transmute things like raw meat into cooked meat. You're able to transmute like sustenance. You're able to transform things that weren't sustainable into something that can be sustainable and even consumed. So the zodiac signs associated with that, hi moth, are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The scientific parallel is super important for me. Like, it's like spirituality in energetics and things like that. I feel like that's something that science, as a practice that's less than 1,000 years old, is starting to give us that backed understanding of. So maybe people that have had, especially tribes, ancient cultures that have already known this knowledge, especially because fire was discovered by primates and humans tens of thousands of years ago. It makes sense that in chemistry and from a scientific parallel, these things are just now coming to match it from a very blink of an eye lens. So in chemistry, the fire, it represents this energy transformation, combustion reactions, and the release of heat and light. And fire requires this fuel and oxygen to exist. So not only are we seeing the elements as they stand alone, we're seeing how they require each other. They're very, inextricable. That'll kind of be my rounding end point, or I might even say it just now, in the sense of the elemental relationships in astrology, they mirror these natural cycles. So water is associated with emotion, and that emotion or water evaporates into air and thought, which then condenses back to water. If you remember from elementary science class, the little graph of the cycles of water. And then once it condenses back into water, that energy, which is associated with fire, transforms into earth and matter. Like, matter cannot change matter, only energy can change matter and form matter, which eventually feeds new growth when combined with water. these cycles show us how we all contain aspects of each element, but just in different proportions. So, that if you go back to that science class map of, how, the cycle of water, you'll see how each element, earth, air, fire, the sun, is all a part of that cycle. So coming back up to that scientific parallel, yes, it requires fuel and oxygen to exist. It is dependent on other elements while simultaneously transforming them. So a little bit about, how fire will show up in the astrological houses is like fire within the first house. So if you have Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius in the first house is also associated with the sign of Aries traditionally in Hellenistic astrology. So in a sense, it kind of has this like fiery element to it in a way. So even if you had like your moon in this house, or you had, Pisces in the first house, you'll see that relationship of fire and water show up from an energetic lens, and we'll talk about that more once we get to water as well. So people with fire in the first house, you might see, bold self-expression, dynamic presence, natural leadership. This could also be associated with having Mars in the first house. Mars is known to be a very fiery, red-hot planet. Or even if you have the sun itself, which is like this super big, ball of energy that is very magnetizing, and in some sort of way, these planets are all like a moth to a flame, in regards to the sun being so large in mass. Not only that, but the very energy of it, fiery energy of it is very magnetizing. And then, compare that with, if you had fire elements in your 10th house, which is associated with your career, the public eye, not just your career, but it could also be your vocation. So what you end up, not doing for actual monetary exchange, but something that's very core to your relationship to the community or the people that you do work for. So that could show up as their ambition within those vocational endeavors and public visibility, and a great passion for your achievements. So I think that's really cool. I really embody, I have something to learn from people with fire in the 10th house. I'm somebody who has a water sign in the 10th house. So I like, and it's a feminine water sign, so it's very, free flowing, and, I definitely require that structure, that riverbed in order for it to be, but nonetheless, it's like, don't get caught up in, sometimes you just gotta do it. Like, that's the best thing that I can describe with people who have, prominent fire placements, and I'm definitely one of those people. I'm just like, just do it sometimes and then let the rest unfold. So moving on with fire with the planets, I talked a little bit about that. If you had like your sun sign in your first house, fire, if your sun sign is in Aries, Leo, or Sagittarius, you'll see this amplification of confidence when it's in its highest alignment, and this amplification of creativity and vitality, which is also associated with fire, just like that. The birth of things can also be born from great fiery happenings. Like, think of the earth becoming scorched, and once the earth is cleansed and scorched, I live in California, so I know it's a common practice amongst many indigenous cultures, even still to this day, to practice controlled fires on the earth, so that you're truly in synastry with the land. And this happens oftentimes before a great rainy season. And what you'll notice is that after the rain comes down upon these scorched earths, that the new growth is even more potent and vital than it was before. Almost like a new generation is being born, and in better circumstances as well. And the same can be for humans too. So, and fire in the sun can also manifest as inspirational leadership. I'm thinking of people who are in my community, or even just in my family, who have fire sons, like my grandmother, who's a Leo, or my sister, who's a Sagittarius. When they're in their highest alignment, they're very inspirational people, and I see a lot of vitality and creativity flows through them like this. And that amplification of confidence doesn't just happen with themselves in regards to energy. The people that you're around, that amplified confidence also, gets poured out into other people, because there can be a great overflow sometimes with fire. I'm like, yes, I know we just talked about controlled fires, but what about fire that spreads wildly, and there is no control, and it's hard to control? In regards to amplified confidence, it can definitely show from an overflow. And if people aren't ready to have that container, and I've been there before, it can be kind of jarring sometimes to see somebody with that much, power and energy and influence. But other times, like I mentioned before, I'm somebody that needs to tap into that energetic drive of just doing it and having that confidence like I'm doing here. It took me a very long time, not just to learn these aspects of astrology, but also to embody it. I can't just read I'm not just reading an article and then coming here and speaking to you guys. I spent 4 years and just simply embodying it for myself, and then I realized, I had a gift of gab when it came to this, so I get to now, amplify that, light the fire within that one, modality of self, and it gets better and better. It gets better and better. So let's move on to, and I think I'll do this in different videos because I like to talk and I like it to be free flowing. I've created this nice structure of this template that I'm looking at right now, but I do enjoy the free flowing nature of this, so I hope it doesn't bother too much. So I'll try and keep myself in line with that. So moving on to fire and Mars, I mentioned that before. Mars is known as like the red hot fiery planet. Mars is the natural ruler of the sign of Aries, and from a modern standpoint, it is considered a natural ruler of the sign of Scorpio as well. So even though Scorpio is a fixed water sign, you do see elements of very, fiery, go-getter nature. And especially, being the sister sign of Taurus, it makes sense. It makes sense. My mother's a Scorpio, so I see that in her every day. She's going through a period of life where she can't be doing her normal activities. She's in the gym most days, every day at, apart from the weekends, maybe at, 5 a.m. consistently through the weeks for the last couple of years. And even before that, she was still always a very, active go-getter nature. So here with fire and Mars, Aries or Scorpio, you'll see, significations of intensified action, courage, competitiveness, from like a high vibrational lens. I always talk about astrology for the most part from a high vibrational lens and from a growth mindset of, how you can move towards things that would, put intensified action in a workable lens, intensified courage in a workable lens, intensified competitiveness in a workable lens, especially when we're thinking about, feminine people as well, women especially, sure, yes, but, anybody that has this polarity of masculine and feminine, how do you balance that competitiveness sort of thing? How do you balance that polarity? And I think fire as an element definitely teaches us that. It's not just a masculine understanding, it's something that is like, again, we were talking about rebirth. That in and of itself is a very feminine, womanly womb trait, to birth something. So that is just, again, that polarity is inextricable. So fire and Mars, I don't even like talking about what it could create, because I think if we're talking about things from a growth mindset, we don't necessarily need to talk about what fire and Mars could do, like create impulsiveness. But it's like, sometimes maybe we won't look at that in a bad way. We'll look at that in how that has, helped people to just push through and not get stuck in this lens of like, oh, let me research this thing, and then let me research this one detail, and then let me research this next thing, and then I can do the thing. But it's like, from what I've noticed about people that just go on based off of impulsivity, in some way, everybody has, from a relative standpoint, everybody is doing things within their own right mind. It may not seem right to you, but from a standpoint of neutrality and relativity, it made sense for them to act impulsively on that. And sometimes it can be bad, or end up in worse off situations, but I think the way that God's consciousness is always, experiencing things through people is from a lens of learning, nonetheless. Even if it puts them in a quote-unquote worse off situation, what did they learn from that impulsivity? How are they going to move forward? They might still be within that, cycle of impulsivity, and then, having a bad, quote-unquote bad result, relatively. But it's like, that's their experience, that's their own journey. And I think that overall, what learning about spirituality and those kinds of connections will teach you is how to apply this law of detachment when it comes to learning about things like this, and elemental things and energetics from such a wide and broad standpoint. Like, there's no right or wrong way. I had a sociology teacher say this to me, and it stuck with me forever, and I still say it. He said, there's no such thing as good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is. It just is. And I think his name was Dr. Summers or something like that. I don't know. Shout out to him. Santa Rosa Junior College. He was awesome. I loved his course. I believe it was Intro to Astrology, and then I took another astrology, Intro to Sociology, and then I took another sociology class by him. But yeah, you'll start to, as we delve deeper into these things, there's no right way to do things. I remember I was on and maybe that's like the masculine way of doing things. Things have to have structure and order and blah, 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 because I've, learned a lot from great teachers like of astrology, and not just astrology, but other people that say, it's best to do things in this order, in this way. But when you start to learn things about like the theory of relativity and theories like law of detachment, and not just theories, these aren't just theories, these are real energetic true things that science has eventually backed, but it's like you'll also learn about the law of projection, and how we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. And the thoughts that we have and the words that we say and the judgments that we cast, it's a form of spell casting, spelling and, casting those spellings and those judgments onto certain things. You'll see the energetics of what you believe start to form into matter, and you'll start to see things from a different lens. So in regards to fire and how it can transform and how it can transmute, it's never ending. Go ahead and put out that fire and then light it again in a different way, and you're going to see things in an entirely new light. But yeah, that's kind of my rant, but I'll end this with fire and Jupiter. And Jupiter is known as like one of the biggest planets within our solar system. And when it comes to fire, what you'll see, like we talked about controlled fires, sometimes there's no such thing as control when it comes to Jupiter. And Jupiter is sometimes all about expansion. That's usually one of its, and from my lenses, at least, for one of the ways to look at it is that it's about expansion. So yeah, I can expand optimism from this lens. It's very adventure seeking and heightened philosophical pursuits. The understanding of philosophical pursuits comes from the truth in Western astrology, Hellenistic astrology, that Jupiter is the ruling planet of the sign of Sagittarius, which is, has connotations to the 9th house. So if you were to look at oh my goodness, I have something in my eye. If you were to look at the astrological chart, dear God, please help me. If you were to look at the astrological chart, and maybe there's a way that I can put it up in there. Actually, I think I'll just show it on my phone. Yeah, this is a good picture. So it might be backwards, but when we look at the from this lens, Aries starts in that first house, and then it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and what's in that 9th house is Sagittarius. So Sagittarius is the natural ruler of the 9th house, and the 9th house is associated with higher learning, religious institutions, churches, mosques, Buddhist temples, you name it. So and also philosophy, of course, higher learning. So that's where that comes from. So pursuing, like fire, pursuing that drive, that that force is backed by that philosophical pursuit, as opposed to maybe water and in Jupiter, maybe there's less pursuit with that, and following multiple pursuits of philosophy, and having a wide expansive lens. Maybe you just go deep. Say if your Jupiter was in Pisces, maybe you just go deep into one philosophical pursuit, like Christianity or Hinduism or Muslim, Islam. Yeah, so I think that is one way to look at it as well. I hope that was helpful. I hope that was expansive in a way. I think I'll talk more about elemental interactions with fire. So fire and air is mutually enhancing. That was one of the first things that we talked about at the start of this video, is that you need the oxygen, the air, to feed the fire. And this then, creates this intellectual passion and inspired communication. Air is associated with communication. I'm speaking And, how are my words even resonating? How are you even hearing this? They're flying through the air. The resonance of it, the vibration of it is flying through the air. It's getting intaken by this beautiful device that we called a computer, a MacBook. And I'm able to share that intellectual passion that I have in this inspiring communication of how to apply astrology from a growth mindset, how to look at it from an optimistic lens, which you can be, embodying even more so, or maybe have more ease embodying if you have these traits of fire in your chart. And everybody does. So, and I think that's the great thing about looking at or talking about astrology from an elemental lens, is because not only do you have, like I showed in that picture, every sign within your chart, every sign, even if there's no planets in a specific house, that house is influencing, that element is influencing your life. My 10th house is empty, but for a while I used to think, once I learned about astrology, I was like, oh shit, I'm destined for like no career. I'm gonna be losing myself. I'm going to be losing myself, I think, forever. But once I really tuned into the understanding of Pisces and how it is, this expansive divine feminine, any structure that I put around it is going to be so deep and so divine and so like fruitful and very like, the word that's coming to mind is just like birth. I'm going to be able to birth things of great depth that are going to, maybe sound a little delusional to some people, but if I apply an appropriate, structure, and I lay down the appropriate riverbed, and the appropriate foundation, then that depth is just going to be able to exist. Even the greatest depths of the ocean have an ocean floor. So, like the Mariana Trench, and you're like, oh my God, it goes on forever and ever, but there's an Earth's core somewhere out there, and that's also what I enjoy about having Pisces at the 10th house. I'm going to get to usually the core of an institution, or wherever I'm working, I'm going to get to the core of things, or I'm always meeting things, where they are at its root. And sometimes I'm uprooting it, sometimes I'm staying down in that depth, and I'm just embodying it, and I'm staying there, and I'm understanding it, and I'm like, yes, okay, I get it. And then other times I'm doing something with it, I'm exploring that, and I'm able to take my explorations of the deep and share them in this way. So I'll say two more things about fire. So fire and water is a bit more of a square. It's a tension. It can be challenging. It invites challenge, which is a good thing. Challenge kind of pushes us to grow and to experience new things. And I'm thinking about times that I've been challenged within my water 10th house. It's been very challenging to even put myself in the correct mindset to come on camera and talk about these things with confidence. But I did it. The challenge is going to offer me, I know it will offer and it will invite this magnetism of abundance and wealth and growth, because water extinguishes the fire. Oh no, it's so pretty. Sorry, I got distracted. It's just so pretty. Water extinguishes fire traditionally, from like on the surface lens of things, and it creates emotional intensity and potential conflict. But something that I talked about, I think, before in my other videos where the audio was trash, but another thing that I think about with fire and water is volcanoes, underwater volcanoes that are helping to solidify this ocean floor, and what gets eroded from that, from the push and pull of the ocean. It's because it's so powerful. It's requiring a steady, relayering of certain foundations. I'm also thinking of what can be birthed from fire and water. You have beautiful islands like Hawaii that, from an ecological standpoint, it wouldn't have existed without a great, explosion of fire in Earth. It would not have happened without that. And that's something that we'll go into with, lastly, with fire and Earth, and that it's complementary. That fire transforms Earth like the volcano did to create the islands of Hawaii. And, with that, it manifests this passion into tangible results. And then you get beautiful islands that beautiful people and live on, beautiful cultures have been able to thrive on for thousands of years. And that, some of us have had the privilege to visit and to hopefully pour love back into that. And I think anytime I've been there in Hawaii, there's been some, energetic level of transformation. And I think that that's definitely present with fire and earth. So that's it for this video about fire. And the next one I will be covering, I don't know what element, but it's going to be some element, and it's going to be really cool. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me for this one. The green light is on, so I think it was recording this whole time. It was, yay. I'm so glad. Yes, I might compile these into bigger videos. I might not. I might just keep jibber jabbering with each element so that I can have a wide range of videos that people can look into. But yes, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time and your energy. Have a beautiful, lovely, and expansive rest of your life, honestly, because I don't know if you're going to join me in the next one or never again. So yes, I'm wishing the very best for you and for humanity. And yes, until next time. Bye. Oh yes, actually, I will say one thing, and I might clip this, but like and subscribe if you do want to see more things like this. I do have an Instagram and a Pinterest that I will link below, and other affiliate marketing pages that I'm connected to and have the privilege of being connected to, that have a breadth of more resources, people that have been in the game for decades of years, and that are also doing great work to reveal this ancient knowledge to humanity. So yes, give a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and nonetheless, thank you again for your time, and yes, have a beautiful rest of your life. Beautiful souls. Toodles.